I'm Nintendo.
And I'm Sega. This is Console Wars! Welcome back to another dating show. Our first contestant is a news anchor who loves yellow jumpsuits. Asking our bachelors those hard questions, welcome April O'Neil!
Yes, thank you. Really happy to be here. I'm really hoping to find that special someone today.
Without seeing them, are you ready to ask our bachelors those questions?
Yes, okay. Bachelor number 1. What are 3 of your legs?
That's easy. Vigilante justice. The feel of a warm skull against my weapon. And shrubbery, planting shrubbery. It helps me find peace.
Okay. Bachelor number 2. Describe your perfect evening.
Excellent question. First, I would take out my rivals, the Turtles. Then, with them out of the way, I could finally take over the world.
Okay, so not dinner and a movie.
She was asking about a date, not your plans for world domination.
A date? Well, then I would take you to a place more worthy of my presence and time. The Technodrome.
Oh, I've never been. That sounds like a fun club.
It is not a club. It is my movable fortress with a giant eyeball fixed atop. There, we could view all the horrors of Dimension X. Or, perhaps we could have my favorite dish, a bowl of delicious turtle soup.
I think I like the world domination better.
You sound insane. Are you trying to scare her away? I mean, really? Turtle soup? Ew.
My recipe is delicious. I've won many awards.
No, you haven't. You've never even been in a competition.
Good to know. Now, Bachelor number
So you don't want to date this guy. He's barely a hero.
You're barely a villain. It looks like you got your outfit from a dumpster outside a Hot Topic.
At least I'm cool in the movies.
No, I'm cool in the movies. Remember? Oops!
Right, but I think you're forgetting about a little movie called Out of the Shadows, Detective.
I have no idea what's happening.
You're just jealous because I'm more famous than you.
Impossible. I am infamous.
I've been in TV shows.
As have I.
There's toys of me.
Well, they make toys of everyone.
Well, I'm in a bunch of video games.
I'm in way more video games than him. I'm in every Ninja Turtles game.
Not every game. I'm in this fighting game for Sega that he's not in at all.
Well, that's because I'm in the much better Super Nintendo game.
You think so? We'll decide whose game is better, and April will date the winner.
That works for me. Do you agree with this, April?
Sure. It's not like I have anything better to do.
And I know just how to settle this.
So you guys came all the way here for us to tell you which game is better.
Precisely.
Yup.
Ah, but we have tickets to the Tim Burton movie marathon.
Yeah, the Depp Years. Ed Wood, Edward Scissorhands. We can't miss it.
We'll pay you.
Sold. Casey Jones is obviously right, because it's definitely better for the Sega Genesis.
Tournament Fighters is better for the Super Nintendo.
What? That's it! Are we doing this?
Does Wise Man say forgiveness is divine but never pay full price for late pizza?
Best Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters is a fighting game developed and published by Konami. There were a total of 3 versions released between 1993 and 1994. They included characters from the old 87 cartoon, the Turtles Adventure comics, the movies, and original characters.
While there was a Nintendo game, we're focusing on the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis versions. Even though they're both fighting games, there are lots of differences. Which one's better? Let's find out. Even though they're both called tournament fighters, they still have different looks. Both games look like typical fighters. They just contain characters from the Ninja Turtles universe. Turtles look similar, but their character designs are quite different. That's where the similarities end. The rest of the characters are completely different, and they look good in their respective games. Other than the Turtles, the only character in both games is Karai, who's also designed differently. The backgrounds are different too. The Super Nintendo takes place in various locations in America? The map looks odd, and the Statue of Liberty's in the middle, but sure, America. The Sega game takes place in Dimension X, and the stages are on various planets. Overall, very different looking games.
Different? But mine's definitely better.
Just check out the backgrounds. Hands down, levels on Super Nintendo look much better than the Sega. First off, they're much more colorful. Sega levels are monochrome, whether it's red, purple, or blue. Very dull compared to the vivid Super Nintendo, where every level is colorful. And it's not just the color, there's a lot more detail. Check out the picture of Marilyn Monroe. Plus, there's a ton of characters in the backgrounds. Lots of characters from the Turtle universe. We got Baxter, Casey Jones, Bebop and Rocksteady. Just so many characters. And they all move. It's like a living world. Nothing moves on the Sega backgrounds. It's more like a dead world. You just have some blinking lights. Cool. It just looks so empty, so barren. No movement in the Sega backgrounds at all. Super Nintendo just looks so much better.
Yeah, sure, you got more things going on in the background, but once again, your game's cropped. All the actual gameplay on Super Nintendo is cropped. The top and bottom of the screens have black bars. Not sure why they did that. Other parts of the Super Nintendo game take up the full screen, but not the gameplay. The Sega game, on the other hand, takes up the full screen. Get an eyeful of those levels on Sega Genesis.
What are you talking about? The HUD on the Sega cuts off so much of your screen. When you line the games up, they're the same size.
Sega still takes up a little more.
A little more screen? Really? At least my characters look right.
On Super Nintendo, April isn't a playable character, but she's there. And yeah, that's how April looked in the old cartoon. And what does she look like on Sega? I don't remember her ever looking like that. What happened? She looks more like Asuka from the Super Nintendo version. Asuka, who was going to be Mitsu from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 movie, but they changed that because Turtles 3 is bad. Anyway, I don't think that was supposed to be April. I think they just changed her name last minute to try and sell more games.
And now let's look at the Turtles again.
The Super Nintendo has some extra animations. Notice how when the Turtles fight on Super Nintendo, they actually take their weapons out. They don't do that on Sega. The Super Nintendo just has more.
There's no denying my game looks better.
For having much more colorful and detailed backgrounds, background characters that actually move, characters that look like they should, and extra animations, best graphics go to Super Nintendo!
Lots of differences in our presentations.
But there are some things in common. Both games tell different stories, but they still have lots of cutscenes. Games have intros, cutscenes between levels, and endings. Both games also have a map of sorts, showing you where your next fight is.
And that's where the similarities end, because my cutscenes are way better.
If you look at the games side by side, you see the Super Nintendo cutscenes actually move. Small movements, but you see them. Once again, the Super Nintendo world just looks more alive compared to Sega. All Sega has during its still picture is some, wait for it, blinking lights. So creative, Sega.
Not only do my cutscenes look better, but I have more of them.
Both games have different modes that we'll get into later. The main one-player mode in both games does have cutscenes. The other one-player mode has cutscenes too, just for the Super Nintendo. You have two different stories in the Super Nintendo game, and they both have their own cutscenes. That's pretty cool. The other one-player mode on Sega doesn't have any cutscenes. No effort at all on the Genesis.
My game also has more things in general.
You have the post-fight taunts in the Super Nintendo. Not in the Sega game. You have these cool little title cards before matches in the Super Nintendo. Not in the Sega game. You have character bios on the Super Nintendo. Not in the Sega game. In Versus mode, you show the stats on Super Nintendo after every fight. Not in the Sega game. There's also a scoreboard in the Super Nintendo game. Say it with me now. Not in the Sega game. Also, my player select screen looks much nicer than yours.
Alright, so you have a few more things.
A lot more, actually.
But it's not over yet. Let's take a look at those HUDs. The HUDs are similar for the most part. They show the life, score, and wins. But when you play one player in Super Nintendo, you don't see the enemies' names. ever. Instead, you have pictures of both characters, in case you forget what they look like. I mean, sure, they show you the names in the tournament mode with the title cards, but they don't show you that in story mode. If you come into this game and start with that mode, you won't know any of your enemies' names. True story, happened to me. You see both names in Sega.
Okay, so I don't have the names all the time, but my HUD still looks better.
Like I said before, my HUD is placed in the action so you can still see the background. The Sega HUD is placed over blank nothingness, dull, just like everything else in the Sega game. Also, what is that for the win tally? Fractions? What am I, in school here? Give me stars like on Super Nintendo.
Okay, but I definitely have one thing that's better than yours. The box art.
The Super Nintendo box art has Donatello. I guess somebody has to have him as their favorite. But the Sega box art has Raphael, the best Ninja Turtle.
You think Raphael is the best?
He's so emotional. He flips over board games when he's losing.
Plus, he also makes spaghetti sandwiches. Talk about carbo loading.
So, who's the best turtle?
Michelangelo!
You know, he's a DJ.
Yeah, he did my cousin's bar mitzvah. We were really lucky to get him. I got hammered.
At a child's party?
Don't you know anything about bar mitzvahs? It's the celebration of him becoming a man.
Well, cover art aside, there's no denying my presentation's better.
With cutscenes that move, more cutscenes, just more. Best presentation goes to Super Nintendo.
It's going to be hard to compare sound because our games have different music.
Both the soundtracks sound appropriate for Ninja Turtles.
And fighting.
But Sega does have a little extra.
The two different boss stages in my game have two different songs, for Krang and Karai.
That's pretty cool.
2 extra songs is nice, but my game does something pretty cool too.
Whenever someone is near death in the Super Nintendo game, the music speeds up. It conveys a better sense of urgency, and it does this for every stage. Don't have that on the Sega.
Faster songs just make me more nervous. I'm glad they're not in my game.
Well, maybe it's time to compare sound effects, specifically the voiceovers.
The voiceovers on Super Nintendo are nice and clear.
Let's take it down. Power grip. Round 1. Fight. Dark Thunder.
Then you have the Sega voiceovers, some of the most distorted voiceovers I've ever heard.
So long, loser. Shock.
You can't even understand them half the time. April also sounds terrible.
Come on, baby. Oh, yeah.
Once again proving my point that this is not April. Also, why did the turtles say Cowabunga so weird in your game?
Those are evil turtle clones from Dimension X. It's not weird, it's appropriate.
It is weirdly appropriate because Cowabunga is how I would describe your sound.
With a solid soundtrack, songs that speed up, and much better voiceovers, best sound goes to Super Nintendo!
These are both fighting games, so gameplay is similar.
Both games have you fighting as various characters in the Turtles universe. Pretty common fighting game mechanics. You have your punching and kicking, you enter button commands to pull off super moves, you beat enough enemies, you fight hidden bosses, then the boss of the game. Karai in both games. Pretty standard fighters.
They seem similar, but lots of differences.
Yep. Let's start with the controls.
The Sega game has 3 buttons, one to punch, one to kick, and one exclusive taunt button.
Come on, baby.
The Super Nintendo has 4 buttons: normal punch, normal kick, fierce punch, and fierce kick.
And we have so many more differences.
Let's talk about the characters.
On Super Nintendo, you can be the 4 turtles. You can also be Armagon, Aska, Chrome Dome, Shredder, War, and Wingnut.
On Sega, you can be the 4 turtles, plus Casey Jones and April O'Neil, and Sisyphus and Ray Fillet.
And looks like I win. I have more characters.
But mine are better.
How?
Mine are more popular.
Other than the turtles, I have Casey Jones and April O'Neil, 2 well-known characters. The only well-known character in your game is Shredder. It's not even Shredder, it's really Cyber Shredder.
Oh, no. That's definitely me. I remember posing for it. It was a little strange, though. It happened in that weird man's basement. And he had me posing with those stuffed animals. And there was all that oil. And all the old rich men telling me to do things. Oh, no. I don't want to put it there. No! I don't want to put it there!
Well, at least my game lets you play as villains.
The selectable characters on Sega are all good guys. The Super Nintendo has some edge. It gives you some villains to play with too. And the Sega game is kinda lame. Since none of the selectable characters are villains on Sega, in the one-player modes you fight evil clone versions of everyone from Dimension X. Kind of a lame setup when you think about it.
Well, it's better than everyone's fighting for money like in your game. And let's talk about those other differences, like the game modes.
The 1-player mode in Sega has you fight everyone until you fight the boss of the game. Then there's a 1-player mode called Tournament, where you fight a bunch of characters in a row. It's pretty much an endurance mode. Then there's a practice mode to hone your skills. And of course you have a versus mode.
Super Nintendo has that beat.
The main one-player mode on Super Nintendo is called Tournament. Definitely different from Sega's Tournament mode. This has a story where everyone is competing for money. Then I also have a story mode. The difference here is you can only play as one of the 4 turtles on a quest to save April and Splinter. You also don't fight any turtles in this mode, except for your evil clone.
Ha! Evil clones!
Yep. Walked right into that. Anyway.
The Super Nintendo game also has a watch mode that lets you just watch the computer fight. And of course, you have your verse mode.
Okay, that's a lot of modes, but come on. A watch mode?
Talk about a pointless mode. Sure, it might be interesting to check out some computer-on-computer action, but how many people actually select this mode? I bet no one has ever selected this mode more than once.
Oh, that reminds me. We should totally do watch mode later with Karai.
You disgust me. But yes, and only the Japanese import version.
Ah, yes, very true. I don't think these guys know about it, though.
You should talk. Your tournament mode's terrible.
The tournament mode on Sega is hard. You want to beat it? Guess how many fights you have to win in a row? 10? 20? 37? How about 88? 88 fights in a row. Are you kidding me? Who's actually going to be able to do that? And the cherry on top? Your life doesn't refill after any of the fights. Talk about a hard pass.
It's still more useful than a watch mode.
Maybe, but your practice mode isn't.
The practice mode. A place to work on moves. Okay. Usually the other character doesn't move, so you can slowly develop your skills. Not on Sega. On Sega, the computer not only attacks back, but they're hard. It's pretty much the same as playing the regular one-player mode. So why have practice mode if it's exactly the same? Sure, you can choose your opponent in practice, but you can just pick the first fighter in one-player mode anyway. So again, pointless.
2 useless modes in your game.
Yeah, but your watch mode is still pretty useless.
I have 2 fun modes, tournament and story. Only your one-player mode is worth playing.
Well, I have tons of exclusives that you don't have in your game.
On Sega, you can select the power and speed every time you select a character. Can't do that on Super Nintendo.
Just want to say, you can change the Super Nintendo game speed in the options menu.
You still can't change the power though.
And I have another Sega exclusive, instant replays.
After the last round of the fight, you get an instant replay. You can watch it normal, fast, slow, frame by frame. The world is your oyster. This is lots of fun in versus mode. You get to relive your moment of victory over and over. or you can be a little immature.
And I have exclusive moves.
The Sega game has an exclusive desperation move. It's a move that can only be performed when your life bar is flashing. It's a more powerful move that can turn the tide of battle.
Shock.
And I got one more thing you don't.
The Sega game had you breaking through certain stages before it was cool. Eat your heart out, Mortal Kombat 3. This is why Krang and Karai have 2 songs, one for each of their stages.
I mean, that's nice. But I have plenty you don't.
In my game, I have an exclusive mutagen meter. Once it's full, it lets you execute a powerful move. Don't need to be near death like in the Sega game.
But it's only in tournament mode, not your story mode.
Well, I have some other exclusives.
On Super Nintendo, you get a fun little mini-game. It breaks up the monotony and gives you points. Points for the scoreboard, which, as I said before, is only in the Super Nintendo game.
Who cares about points? Breaking through stages and instant replays are much cooler.
Alright, let's talk about something done much better on Super Nintendo. The endings.
Both games have good and bad endings. It depends on the difficulty level you choose. On Super Nintendo, you have 8 difficulty levels. Beating the game on 0, 1, or 2 tells you you're not ready for the boss, and to try a higher difficulty. 3 to 5 gives you a good ending with cutscenes. 6 or 7 gives you the best ending. This just means more fancy credits, and more accolades in the congratulations screen. Plus, every character has their own exclusive ending. Talk about replayability.
So, my game's like that too.
Oh, it's not.
On Sega, you have 8 different difficulty levels too. Beating the game on 1, you don't even get an ending or credits. Just a challenge the next level. Beating the game on 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, all you get is the bad ending. The only way to get a good ending is to play the game on level 8 or final. Talk about a ripoff. You have to play the hardest difficulty just to see a good ending? That's lame.
Well, so what? I mean, you have bad endings too.
Yeah, but I don't have to play the hardest difficulty to see the good ending.
In tournament mode on Super Nintendo, you can see every character's ending as long as you play on difficulty 3. The only differences with playing on 6 or 7 are cool credits and some more encouraging words. You see the same ending. In story mode, however, you do need to beat the game at 6 or 7 if you want to see some April on Turtle action. Difficult? Yes. But you could always settle for beating the game at 3 and still get the good ending. The Sega game just feels like a slap in the face. Karai just talking some garbage about you beating her clone and not being good enough. Then credits roll over Dimension X. Only when you beat the game on the hardest difficulty does Karai admit defeat. Then you're treated to a lame-looking ending that's definitely not worth it. And no, there are no different endings for different characters. Just the one lame, overly difficult to get to, definitely not worth it ending for every character.
So you just gotta be a little tougher to play my game.
More like a glutton for punishment. And if that doesn't convince you, maybe my cheat codes will.
The Super Nintendo has cheats to let you play as the boss characters Rat King and Karai. And I can also unlock their levels. And you know how my story mode doesn't have a mutagen meter? Well, with the cheat code, it can. Much better than the Sega cheat codes, which there are none. No cheats on the Sega game. That's just lame.
Well, I mean, I got plenty of cheats. And I can be the bosses too. With the Game Genie.
Are you kidding me? In-game cheats are so much better. And so is my gameplay.
For having more characters, a tournament and story mode, a mutagen meter for specials, a fun minigame, multiple endings, easier to access endings when it comes to difficulty, cheats for levels and bosses, best gameplay goes to Super Nintendo!
Both games are good, but one's better. And that's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters on the Super Nintendo.
It has better graphics with much more colorful backgrounds, much more detailed backgrounds, background characters that actually move, characters that look like they should, and extra animations. It has better presentation with cutscenes that move, more cutscenes, and just overall more effort. It has better sound with a solid soundtrack and much better voiceovers. It has better gameplay with more characters, solid tournament and story mode, a mutagen meter for specials, a fun minigame, multiple endings, easier to access endings, and cheats for levels and bosses. The Sega gameplay's fine though. Biggest thing it has going for it is the different characters. Other things are cool too, like the taunt button or instant replay. It's just that, compared to the Super Nintendo game, it looks, sounds, and feels worse. And the fact that you can't get the good ending unless you play on the hardest difficulty is absurd. I guess what I'm trying to say is the Super Nintendo game is more like Cowabunga, and the Sega game is
Cowabunga.
Best Tournament Fighters goes to Super Nintendo! So, we good?
Oh, absolutely. My game's better. Time to win the love of a woman due to video games.
Welcome back to another dating show. This episode is brought to you by Peanut Butter Wax, the only car wax to give you that peanut butter shine.
Okay, so after thinking it over, I've decided to go with Bachelor number 3.
Why, thank you. What an honor. What? Bachelor number 3?
I didn't even know there was a Bachelor number 3.
That's because you two kept talking and wouldn't let me even ask him a question. Want to introduce yourself, Bachelor number 3?
Hey, it's me, Raphael, the cool Ninja Turtle. Oh!
While you were gone, we talked a lot and really made a connection. Did you know he likes spaghetti sandwiches? That's my favorite!
We are gonna have so much fun on this day you won't even know what hits you. Cowabunga!
This has been another dating show, and now a journey to the future.
Thanks for checking out our latest video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, check us out on Patreon for early releases and extra stuff. Special thanks to Xavier the Lightning for his donation of the 2 games, and thanks to everyone who requested Tournament Fighters. And keep those suggestions coming, we will get to them. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more Console Wars goodness. Later.
Did you catch that?